if you're into becoming a better human being, doing better every single day, getting better results, making a bigger impact, today's conversation may be supportive. It's all about integrity. And this has been one of the hardest things to grasp for myself over the years of being in, like, let's say, personal development and coaching and just wanting to create a better life. And the reason why it was hard to grasp is because of the implications of recognizing the cost of not being integrous every day in life. And so, first, before we even jump in, like, the first thing I think that is important in me sharing is for you to hear my definition of integrity, because when I say integrity, some people might have an interpretation of what that means. They might make it automatically mean honest or complete or whatever. So, and by the way, this is that's a super interesting subject on its own. Is just like, I think people talk about the same things and they call it something different, and sometimes they're talking about the same word, but they actually have different meanings and definitions, which they're actually on a different. That's like where communication breakdowns and like that is an interesting topic. But like for myself, I have now come to the definition of, it means to be in integrity is to say what you're going to do and then do it. And then when you say you're not going to do something, or when I say I'm not going to do something and not doing it. And that's evolved over time. And by the way, that's not the definition in at least the Google version of the definition on the internet. And if you see me looking back and forth, I've got multiple screens going. So trying to like be right in the middle. So I think that's the first thing. And then like, I think something else that's really important to impact that I want to share briefly is just like the orbiting symptoms that are result that are like that are affected as a result of either being in integrity and being integrous or not being integrity and integrous, which we'll talk about. And I'm going to share a couple vulnerable stories, but before the end. But I think I'm going to connect the dots of like what happens, and this is just from my personal experience. So I've got, like, one of the things that you'll hear me say is this is a description of my experience and what's worked for me, not a prescription for you or your life. You might want to try it on, of course, see if it works out, try it for a couple of days and see if it creates better results or you feel better about yourself or whatever. Thank you, Jesse Elder, for that definition, by the way. But like, I think the most important thing is, like, for me, understanding what that cost of not being in integrity is. Like, it's the easiest way for me to articulate this for somebody who this might be like a new space to start exploring, or to go to the depths of what this actually means, is like to view yourself from the perspective of somebody else. So having empathy, like being in their shoes and viewing yourself. So we do this every day. So let's take an example of, like, let's say you're the boss of a team and somebody tells you they are going to for sure be on time, they're going to be there, and then they show up an hour late. Like, what happens with your trust in them? What do you start to believe about them? What do you start to make up about them? What happens in that relationship? And so I think putting ourselves in other people's shoes of how we see ourselves, and then like especially if we say we're going to do something and then not doing it, like what's the cost of that? Like, there's a lower in the uh, trust factor. There's like this like hesitancy, right? Like, there's so many bigger costs that come as a result of that. And then, like, on the flip side of that, of like saying you're not going to do something and then doing it, which I'm going to give an example here in a second, like, what's the cost of that in the relationship? And so I think for me, like, that was a blind spot for a long time. And as my definition has evolved and as I continue to step further into living by guiding values and principles to the best of my ability. And that doesn't mean like I'll do everything, like I do my best, but sometimes we're going to fall short and like we're never going to be perfect. So also giving ourselves grace, but like, that's not an out. That's not an out to not being integrous if that's what somebody wants, right? And for me, like, I'll hold the bar pretty high for myself, and I still fall short for it, like every day. Like, if we're not falling short and um being challenged or having a breakdown, sometimes it's like, how high of a bar have we set for ourselves in our lives? If we're like operating on the like the median, every single day where it's like, yeah, it's good. It's good enough. So there, the other thing that I think is really important is, again, going back to those like orbiting symptoms, is like what happens when we do start to be in integrity. And I'm not talking about just to others. And I think this is where people stop, is like the thing, at least for me, again, going back to myself, is like there's a whole nother level of like what self-talk, like thoughts that we're thinking that we think we should be doing. Like if we say we're going to go to the gym for an hour and a half and we go for an hour and 15 minutes, like there's a cost to that. And so like what's the cost? And going back to like how other people see ourselves, that's happening on ourselves every single day. So every time we're not breaking our word, not doing what we're going to say we're going to do, doing something we're not say we won't do, like there's that same cost in like how with other people, like there's a loss of trust of self, there's a lack of belief that happens, and it slowly erodes over time. And the longer this happens, the bigger the cost. And so again, going back to the flip side, it's like what happens when you do start to be integrity? Like this is fun. So it's like your confidence actually starts to be built. Like if you want to do something that you've never achieved before, like you've got to build the confidence and the courage, and both of those will come as a result of starting to just be our word to ourselves. That's what I've noticed, and I've got a great other second story that I'll share as a little like the exact illustration of this in something that occurred to me. So I think first why this is even as important to me is I had a traumatic experience when I was let's call it in a high school time frame, of somebody saying that they were going to be there for me, and I ended up waiting for like multiple hours. And it really angered me, it frustrated me, it saddened me. And it made me think like, I don't want to do that to other people. Somebody had said they were going to do something, they actually didn't do it. And like going back, like what's the cost in that relationship for that person, how I view them. And like I have total forgiveness and have moved beyond it, but like this is where it really, like when I really started to look back on my life, like this is something that really made a difference for me, is like having this realization and how important this is. And so from that standpoint is like, yeah, I see how important that is to people, like especially if they're going through hard times, like saying you're going to be there for somebody, right? And so that traumatic experience, and trauma doesn't of course have to be huge. Like it could be like that, it could be like feeling left or abandoned or forgot about or whatever, which then has other orbiting symptoms as a result of that, which I highly recommend people do that work of like healing that, going back to the past and forgiving that person, or reminding yourself when you are going through that of like, you're going to be okay, something better is coming out of this. But I'll go back to something that's relatively recent in the last couple of years of like, I've stopped drinking in the last about 18 months or something. And one of the things that was happening in my relationship with my girlfriend at the time was, um, she was really sort of trying to support me of like breaking free from that habit of drinking. And, there would be times where she would ask if I was going to drink or whatever. And I would say, no, I'm not going to. And I would. And so there was a huge again, going back to that cost, there's a lack of trust and like erosion of the depth and the connection and the like opportunity in the relationship as a result of not being in integrity. There's a huge cost. And that over time can be very detrimental to people, right? Like especially if both parties are committed to growth, it's like it's not going to work. And so that had a huge implication on my relationship for sure. And I'm thankful that she really stood for that happening and really took a stand. And I finally got to a point where I was like, okay, I get to really do this. Like I really understood the cost of that, not fulfilling on integrity, but also like the cost of like what drinking was costing me too. So diving even further into a totally different subject, which I did a video on a couple days ago. If you want to go back and watch that, depending on where you're watching this, Facebook specifically, I know it's at. And so, but like, let's go to the flip side. Okay. So I'm not trying to be super heavy. Like, let's also talk about the flip side of this and how like cool and how this is actually a superpower. Like I really believe this becomes a superpower. So I've been focusing on endurance over the last couple of years. And last year, about this time, April of 2023, I was probably doing, I don't remember the specifics, 7 to 9 miles of running per 7 to 11, 12, 13 miles a week. Okay. So we're talking 30 to 50 miles. So we're not like, I'm not in shape, but I decided within 30 days that I would do a marathon. And here's what the superpower is. You go like how I went about it is I went and looked and like checked out like what happens if you try to train for a marathon in 30 days. Like you, again, it's totally different than starting from scratch and zero. I actually wouldn't recommend that for almost anybody. But um here's what I knew is most experts and coaches were like, it's still basically a bad idea to do to just jump into that and go like all of a sudden your entire month's worth of running in 1 week. And I think I ran like 200 miles. But like here's so I had built up the trust in myself, and I had said I would train X amount, and I had become confident and courageous in my ability to fulfill on workouts, running. I would when I said I was going to run like 10 miles, 5 miles, 15 miles, like I went and I didn't stop. Like I wouldn't stop until I was done. Like no matter what. And so I had built it in with integrity, the confidence in my ability, the follow through, those those orbiting symptoms that I was talking about that were now directly affecting my ability to work out. And so what happened for me is over time, I began to say bigger and better things, like what people would call goals, like have bigger goals and find that they would just magically start to happen. And so this is where the superpower is like, I believe that when we start to really live out integrity in our work, our relationships, our self-talk, our like whatever it is, we begin to build this momentum where we can start to think, say, and like go for bigger things. And there's a point where it becomes like a singularity where it's like all of a sudden it has to happen because we have the momentum and we have that confidence and we already have the past that we can look at as like this has already happened, so why would this not happen? Like I like that really becomes a reality. And I've watched it in many other people of coaching people for over hundreds of people over the last couple of years, but I've really experienced it for myself in this story right here. Like if you really hear what I'm saying, like it's insane. Like I went from running 5, 6, 7, 8 miles a day, a week, to all of a sudden doing basically 5, 10x that. I did 200 in a month. And I was able to do that because I had integrity and trust in myself to be able to do that. And I would share that with the world. And then I've had no choice but to follow through because that's just who I've become. It's just like stepping into that. And so there are some really cool, like orbiting symptoms that happen as a result of just being in integrity. And so um, the other real quick thing is like writing things down in the morning. Like if you want to be more productive and like how integrity ties in is like writing things down. Like it starts in small steps. So if you're like, if this is new to you, it's like, don't go for a million miles an hour. It's like, just take one or two small steps and then build that over time. And the momentum will eventually build where you can do something like I'm sharing in your own life. That's my belief for you. Like, no matter who you are, no matter how many times you've broken your word, no matter how low your confidence is, no matter how much of a shell you feel, you're like, whatever it is. So you want to be more productive and more focused and get more done quicker, and then have that example that I was sharing about the productivity of how much running I was doing, and then the big results of a marathon in 30 days. It's like, how do we apply that to our work or what we're business focused or sales or whatever? It's like, write the things down in the morning that you need to do in every single day. Check it off. 5 things, 7 things, 10 things, 3 things, 2 things, 1 thing. Like just do that. And over time, what'll happen is you'll start to have the belief in yourself and you'll start to have that trust in the integrity superpower that I'm talking about. And what'll happen is you'll get through and like not stop, like not going to bed until all of those things are checked off that you know that get to be done in the day. And what'll happen is all of a sudden you're getting more done in your day and you're like completing things, you're checking things off, you're building the confidence, you're building the muscle, you're building the momentum, and then that singularity thing happens again. So these are just some superpowers and like some things that I've learned that have really made a difference for me. That I think integrity, there's a couple of really big values I think that have trajectory shifted the trajectory of my life and the results that I've been able to experience and have. And it never stops. By the way, you finish one race and another race starts. So whatever the goals and results are that you're looking for, it's like what happens when you get there? It's like more than likely you'll be like most, because you're ambitious probably. If you do have goals and desires to get better, it's like you get to the top of a mountain and there's another mountain to climb. It's like, all right, let's keep going. So the big things that have moved the dial forward on those results and all that is being in integrity and then being 100% responsible. Not taking responsibility, but recognizing that like I am responsible for like everything that's in my life. And so I think that'll probably be the next video for tomorrow. So if you're watching this on my 30-day series, today is day 11, tomorrow's day 12. So be on the lookout for how to take the power back. No more government taking the power, no more blame or shame or parents or trauma or circumstances or money or job or boss or whatever. It's like, this is the secret superpower to having the power back to then have the things that you want in your life at another level. So I hope you got some value. Peace, love, prosperity to you. See you on the next call.